Gavin de Becker, in his book, The Gift of Fear, rates of people's experiences who encountered dangerous situations, who, on reflecting on it later, realized they'd had a sense that something wasn't right, that something was wrong, and that their body had picked up clues and signals that their conscious mind hadn't. And unfortunately, many of them had, not honored that inner knowing of a situation and come to harm's way. A lot of Gavin's work is about training people to tune into that sense of knowing that's below the level of our kind of conscious thought to help us keep safe. And this work kind of demonstrates that a lot of our knowing is actually at that level. We generally tend to think that our knowing is through our inner self-talk, our understanding through words, but a lot of our knowing is more visceral. A lot of our processing, our perception happens at a deeper level of the mind. Eugene Gendlin, who coined the term the felt sense and developed the practice of focusing, which is a way of tuning into the body's sense of knowing, he was a philosopher who was very interested. He started his whole work because he was interested in the idea that we can have a sense of knowing something that we can't yet articulate. We know something, and then it's only through, exploring it through words that we begin to fully understand it. But there's a knowing there first. And you can think about this in another way, that think of somebody that you know well, maybe a family member, somebody you've known for a long time, and you have a whole sense of who they are that you could never fully describe in words. You have a sense of their character, of how they'll be. And there's a knowing and an understanding that's there that's not encapsulated in words. And I think it's very important to be aware of this. Often we are just very associated with what we can consciously think in words, but there's a way of knowing that's more immediate and visceral and body-based. I'll give you a slightly different example of this. Raymond Carver, who's a writer back in the 50s, he once talked about knowing he had a story in him that was ready to be birthed, but all he had was the first line. And the first line was, she went to the closet and got out the vacuum cleaner. That's all he had consciously, but he knew there was a whole story there. And I laughed when I first heard this because I'm a writer and I've had that experience. I've had that experience of sensing there's a story in me and I only have just a little bit of the idea. And when I sit down to write, it flows out of me. There's kind of a story in there. There's a knowing and an understanding that I'm not yet aware of. And this is a key idea of focusing, that there's a knowing that's not yet conscious, and that by tuning into the body is a way that we can get into that deeper mind. There's that old analogy of the iceberg, where most of the iceberg is below the surface of the water, and our minds are much the same way. What we're conscious of in our thinking, rational way sits on top of a much greater level of knowing. Most of our perceptions and our processing happens at a deeper level, and tuning into the body is a way of accessing this. I started this whole reflection because this week I had an interesting experience in coaching. I was coaching somebody who, came in with a situation of feeling a dilemma about choosing between two courses of action. And they were kind of weighing the pros and cons and going back and forth. And, it was kind of circulating. It wasn't really going anywhere. And I suggested we just drop into the body, and we did a quick centering exercise. And while they're kind of in that centered space, I asked them to bring in the idea of the first option and notice what they felt in their body as they did so. And as they did that, they said, oh, they felt a heaviness. When they thought about that option, there was actually a kind of a heavy feeling in the chest. And I said, okay, well, now bring in the second option. And when they brought in the second option, they felt a lightness, a sense of expansion. And as a coach, I was thinking, oh, that's great. We've found some clarity. But this person immediately kind of went back to thinking about it. And as I reflected on it later, I found that very interesting because in my own experience, I've learned to kind of trust that tuning into my body sense. If moving in one direction gives me a sense of feeling or tenseness, and moving in another direction gives me a sense of ease or openness, I feel clear about what to move ahead. But this person didn't have that experience. Like, he tuned into his sensations and he felt that, but that wasn't enough. He didn't trust that level of feeling. And it was very, very curious. And I realized that in our culture, we're very used to thinking of knowing and deciding as only coming through our thinking mind. And for most people, there's not that sense of trust with, that internal body sense. And this is something that Gavin de Becker in The Gift of Fear talks about, that unfortunately, too many people don't trust that inner sense. And unfortunately, so many people came to harm by not tuning in and honoring that inner sense that they had about situations. But this sense of ours being able to tune into the body's wisdom and trusting that is something that builds over time. The more you work with it, the more you work with your listening to your body, what the inner felt sense is, then you become more familiar with it and you realize its effectiveness. But I want to make a distinction here because sometimes when people talk about feeling the body, they think about emotions. And when we talk about the felt sense, it's not emotions. The felt sense emotions might be part of the felt sense, but the felt sense is a bigger, kind of deeper sense of knowing beneath that. And I think people sometimes don't trust their body's wisdom because emotions can lead us astray. We can get triggered by something into anger, and then our anger is inappropriate or disproportionate to a situation, or we can be sad, and that can kind of cloud our vision, or we can get really excited by something and then buy something that we wish later we hadn't. There's ways that our emotional energy can kind of pull us a little bit off course. So it's important to know that, to think about that when we talk about the felt sense, we're not really talking about emotions. It includes emotions. There's a deeper level of knowing within the body that we can access through the felt sense. And this is something that we get more skilled with the more we do it. And actually, Gavin de Becker, again, he talks about this, that there's a way that the more you work with it, for instance, you can learn to know when fear is a radar and it's telling you something important about your situation, or when you're actually just more feeling anxiety and worry. The more we work with tuning into our body sense, we know when we can trust it more. We build that trust, and we actually become more able to distinguish, say, a deeper feeling from being triggered. So the more we work with it, the more it opens up. And if this is new to you, that whole idea of tuning into the body and the felt sense, I encourage you to do some more looking into it. I have a whole video more that I talk about focusing and the felt sense. And there's also all the work with Eugene Gendlin, who developed focusing. He's got books and videos, as well as Ann Weiser Cornell. She's very accessible with this work. But it's also bigger than that. Like, focusing is just one practice that you can do. It's one that I found highly effective. But humans have been tuning into the body sense for a long time. And it's something that we can naturally do. It's just something in our modern world, we've become very used to processing information just through words. But as we tune into the body sense, we can have more clarity about how we move forward. And if this is new to you, it can be helpful to work with somebody one-on-one to begin to establish that ability of tuning in, moving ourselves out of our usual thinking, and learning to listen to the body, and how you can start to let those inner feelings flesh out and become understood. So I do embodiment coaching, where I primarily work with focusing. If you're curious, visit my website and book a free discovery call, and we can do a mini focusing session. And I also encourage you to check out the Focusing Institute, where you'll find other practitioners or little courses that you can take where you can start to learn more about it and practice it. So I just want to end by saying that, the body likes to be listened to. The body likes to, responds when we take that time to tune in, and there's valuable information there that when we do so. It's a way to move forward in our lives. I hope that you found this video interesting, giving you something to think about. If you have, you could hit like or subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thank you, and may you take some time out today to listen to your body, just sense what it's feeling. Thank you.